Welcome to Voiceprint with Trevor Devall and Guests. And now, your host and mine, Trevor Devall.
It's been far too long since I heard that round of applause that I've created just for myself. Far too long. I think over 2 months now. And the thing is, every time I do a show, the distance, the length of time between the new show and the next show just gets longer and longer and longer. And I think I'm in danger of succumbing to what the pundits call pod fade, which is no good. And I promise you, my friends, there will be no pod fading from Voiceprint, but I do apologize. I'm forever apologizing on this show at the beginning of the show. Forever apologizing for being late, horrifyingly late in this case, over 2 months. It's not going to happen next time. I really mean it this time. My next guest, who I'll announce at the end of the show, like tomorrow. We're doing the show tomorrow. Well, maybe not tomorrow. Give you some time to write any questions. Welcome back, my friends. This is Voiceprint with Trevor Devall and Guests. I am, as always, your intrepid host, Trevor Devall. Welcome back to the show. Well, I'd like to say it's been a whirlwind year for us voice actors here in Vancouver, but that would be a despicable lie. Things are very, very slow here, very dead. Very dead. We're all walking corpses right now, waiting for the next big show to come so we can all fight each other for a tiny little role on it. It's been a couple little things here and there, a couple little ADR shows, a couple little prelay things, little guest stars for Trev here and there. But other than that, the reason why the show's been taking so long is because, once again, I've been out of town. I've been over in Europe, was in France and Normandy. France and Normandy, mind you. I was in the Normandy part of France, and that was awesome. Did the beaches, did the whole World War II thing. I'm a bit of a World War II buff, for those of you who don't know, and that was actually quite a very, very, very powerful thing for me to be on those beaches and to go to the memorials and see all that stuff. And if any of you ever get a chance to get over there, I do strongly recommend it. France is a very beautiful country. Very beautiful country. All of the people, well, maybe not the people. No, I don't mind the people. A lot of people say the French people are problems, but I don't find them problematic at all. I quite enjoy them. Anyway, enough about that crap. We're back to the show now, and I promise you, well, I don't promise. I'm going to try and make the show, now that we're officially in our second season. This is the beginning of our second season, I guess, because we're calling this season 20 episodes, because what the hell. So this is the first show of the second season, and we're going to try and get a more regular schedule going. I'm hoping to do once a month. That's kind of what I was doing before, and I'd like to keep that up. So I guess I'll see you guys in about 4 months then, judging by my horrible tardiness. Anyway, we've got a great show for you today. A fantastic show. We are starting off this season with a guest who is a dear friend of mine, a wonderful colleague to work with, and someone who's going to talk to us a little bit about things on the other side of the glass. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. James Corrigall!
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. What a lovely introduction, Trevor. You're very kind.
I'm very, very kind, I know.
And I was trying to gesticulate at you before as you were using an English accent to describe your time in France. I don't know if you're planning to expand the British Empire and take over. That war's done. It's time to move on.
I know. Well, I'm always hoping for a resurgence of the battle, but I don't think...
Yeah, trebuchets are awesome. Let's not kid ourselves.
I saw a demonstration of one of those at the Tower of London.
Like a live trebuchet?
Like an actual trebuchet.
What did they fling?
I don't know it must have been some sort of it wasn't anything obviously dangerous, you know.
Then really the point is lost, isn't it?
Well, they were showing...
Shouldn't they be breaking walls with the trebuchet?
You'd think. But it's right there, essentially in the middle of the city. The Tower of London, right in the middle of the city.
It is,
and I'm thinking if one of those things goes awry, then you're flinging one of those trebuchet bolts
Yes, and
into the middle of some street.
somebody on a scooter is going to get a bolt quite
That's right.
firmly implanted somewhere.
An authentic medieval experience if it's a tourist.
Yes. Perhaps a Renaissance fair will get hit, and then all will be well.
That's
That'll
right.
be a good story for them to
That's
tell.
right. Thanks for coming on the show.
Pleasure.
Good to have you.
Pleasure.
I've been promising you this spot
Yeah,
for some time now.
I've been waiting by the phone for like weeks now, and there's been some tears. And I'm okay now, though. It's good.
Well, you got a glass of wine in
You
your
plied
hand.
me with booze, and that's really all it takes. I'm a cheap interview.
Cheap interview. I'd also like to point out to the listeners right now that the studio room is actually coming together quite nicely. It's starting to actually feel more like an audio studio because
It does.
before
Was there problems?
well,
before?
not problems, but I was in the closet before. Insert
Okay,
joke there.
I'm not going to even touch it because sometimes the door swings so wide open that it's just insulting.
Yes, I was recording in the closet
yes.
before,
Nice.
and that actually had great sound quality, but there was no room and it was hot. And no, it was a terrible thing.
This
And
is nice. We have eye contact.
We do. We
yes,
do.
It's like a little conversation.
It is like a little conversation.
Lovely. Lovely.
All right, let's get on with the show and begin with a little bit of your history. And now, Voiceprint with Trevor Devall and Guests presents In Memoriam, a history of our guests' long and faithful service to the cause of voice acting. I was going to actually change up some of the bumpers for the new season and change the intro song and all that stuff, but that piece of music is just so inspiring.
It's very PBS. It sort of makes me feel like I should be smoking a pipe and sitting in some sort of lounging chair. Oh, you caught me reading. Hello.
So, I normally go to IMDb to look at the history of our guests, and I did with you. But IMDb, have you looked up yourself on IMDb?
I have IMDb abated.
They have certain things there, and a lot of it's sort of as a technician and stuff like that. They do have your directorial stuff, but I would rather actually just hear it from you because, and this is also for my own benefit, I've worked with you many, many times, but I would like to know from the beginning of your directorial career all the shows you've done. In order, go.
Okay, well, first there was in alphabetical order. There was no. I can remember certainly the bigger ones. My first show was I spent about the first year and a bit when I was at Ocean as an engineer and dialogue editor and DAT backup engineer, which is how you used to start at Ocean, which basically involves writing down numbers all day long. It's fascinating work, but luckily enough, people quit ahead of me and were hired below me that I was able to move up to dialogue editing quite quickly and do some of that. But I always knew I wanted to get into the voice directing part of it once I was in session and saw that working. I was like, that's the job, because you get to tell people what to do, and that's all sorts of fun. So ultimately they had a hole in the schedule. They needed another dialogue editor or another director rather, and they asked me. So Carl Willems, who you know, of course, had been
a guest on this show.
Of course. He was directing a show called Monster Rancher, but I had been working on as well as a dialogue editor. And another season was coming up, but Carl was too busy. His schedule was too full, so they asked me to take over for it. And yeah, my first week was with sort of Carl shadowing me as I attempted to, I very clearly remember my very first recording session was with Brian Drummond playing Tiger in Monster Rancher. He was very kind to me, even though I was like shaky nervous, because really it's such a subjective job when it comes down to it, and you don't know if people are going to listen to you and if you're going to be saying the right things to begin with. A lot of the time you're talking out of your backside. So
Tell me about it.
It was a little upsetting at first, but no, I mean, there was just really supportive people around me. Like Carl was just so helpful in sort of letting me know how to talk to actors. I had some theater experience before, but when you're just one-on-one with an actor in an ADR situation, it's just, it's just the two of you basically, and you're trying to piece together this show. It's it's a puzzle in a lot of ways. So, yeah, Monster Rancher was my very first gig, and that was a lot of fun. And yeah, it offered a lot of challenges too right off the bat, because Andrew Francis, who played the lead character Genki, his voice changed right between seasons 2 and 3. So
the balls dropped, you might say.
And it wasn't a subtle variation with Andrew either. He really sounded manly all of a sudden. So we had to accommodate that. But yeah,
I remember when that happened from my perspective, because we were doing Dragon Booster at the time, or maybe it was right before.
And your balls dropped?
Not mine.
Oh, sorry.
Not mine.
No, okay.
But he came in, and of course, the last time I'd seen him, he was one of these young kind of guys.
Yeah.
And he came in to do this character for Dragon Booster, and he opens his mouth, and what comes out is this? And I was like, oh my, what happened?
He's got a massive range now, because he can actually still push his voice up to those upper levels. But he was in session with me the other day, and I think he's got in the back of his head that he's going to take over for the in a world guy.
Oh, yeah.
And he has this, when he gets to the depths of his range, he gets this nice, smooth roundness to it that he could totally pull it off if he works on it. So I think that, that's the gig to aim for, because I don't know if you've heard stories about that guy, but he just, he would have deals in his contract that they would have 3 studios set up for him, and he would go in and do, one, you get a maximum of 3 clean takes. You go from one studio to the next and walk out $45,000 richer.
Yeah.
And that, it's just wow.
Good gig if you can get it.
Indeed. But yeah, so Monster Rancher was the first show that I'd sort of taken over from Carl. The first series that I started as my own was Zoids.
Zoids?
Yeah. And were you,
Zoids Furors?
You were in Zoids,
Yep,
were you not? I don't remember the name
briefly.
of your character offhand. That was probably a good 8 years ago or so I can be forgiven for the lapse in memory. But
was it Rotten Roger? Does that ring a bell? I think I played somebody named Rotten Roger, and I might have
it
been
could
in
well
that.
be, yeah. It was a fun show. It was, a big mecha show, so
And these were
lots of battles.
these were both at Ocean so far.
Yeah, well, this one was at a studio that Ocean had rented out, but
Westwood.
Yeah, it was still. Well, I don't even know how the connections between the companies work. They never tell me about that. I'm just asked to direct a show. I show up, and I'm happy.
Right.
And yeah, and it was interesting. This is a totally off-topic thing, but it was like the second day of recording, and that was with the 9/11 when the planes hit the towers, and all my life was focused on this new job because I really wanted to do well with this. I didn't want to get pickups. I didn't want to get, I wanted to do such a good job that they'd keep giving me new series. So I come to work and the engineer's waiting for me outside. Like, did you hear about the towers? And I'm like, oh my God. And so we're watching this on TV half the day. But to be honest, like so much of my focus was still on Zoids, which seemed so petty at the time. But yeah, it was such an odd day. But that was a really fun show to start off on because it was very free reign and there wasn't a lot of client involvement. So I was able to sort of stretch my wings and figure it out. And
Cool.
from there, I think that's when the Gundam started. That's when.
And the first Gundam you did was
Zeta Gundam.
Zeta Gundam.
Yeah, which was done in a Calgary studio.
Ah, right.
And that was, Zeta Gundam was, and I'm sure fans will correct me on this, but I'm pretty sure it was the second animated show, second or third maybe, that came out of the Gundam universe, and it was animated in the 80s.
Because the first one was what? It wasn't Mobile Suit. It was Gundam Wing, wasn't it?
Or it was Gundam. It was just I don't know if Wing or Mobile Suit Gundam, which is also called First Gundam, came first. I've always assumed.
I think it was Gundam Wing or whatever it was called because I did Mobile Suit Gundam a very little bit at the very, very beginning. This was 10 years ago.
Okay.
But I know that like all Kirby and Scotty and all these guys are going down to Florida for a convention, like imminently, I think, to do a convention specifically for the series that was right before that, which is Gundam whatever.
Yeah. So the ones that I didn't direct, I know so little about the timeline. Right. Zeta Gundam was, all I know is it was animated in the 80s and really looked like it was. There was a lot of money saved by the zero-G environments. When you don't have to have a animated character walking, you can basically just slide the character plane across the screen very smoothly, and there you have a zero-G environment.
That's right.
So yeah, and then the helmet haircuts and stuff. It wasn't until somewhere around Gundam Seed they started opening the really good space hair salons that everybody seemed to go to with great regularity because wow, did their hair look good. But yeah, from that there was Gundam Seed, there was Gundam Seed Destiny, there was Hamtaro I worked on as well. That was so much fun because there's a lot of potential for studio comedy when you have people playing cutesy little hamsters / gerbils. The number of Richard Gere references that came up in the course of that series is, and you had to get creative after a while because it was 100 episodes and it wasn't easy to work Richard Gere in a new way after a while, but still worth the effort. I mean, so many of the smaller series, I've forgotten the details of over the years, but recently the ones that are standing out, of course, are like Black Lagoon, which you were in. Mm-hmm. And was so much fun to direct.
For all kinds of reasons. We'll get to that one.
Yeah. And Nana, which ended recently. And I'm not sure exactly what the plan is for Nana. I think they're going to be broadcasting it somewhere, and I'm sure it's going to get a DVD release as well. I'm usually the last person to find out about these things, unfortunately. I never receive, a copy of the series. It's sometimes gets intercepted before it gets to me. But Nana is one of the shows I'm most proud of. I think it's just a phenomenally good show. It's so accessible and so it really warms your heart. You get to know the characters.
But it's not airing yet, as far as we know.
No, as far as I know. But
so it's really not that accessible at all. Is
no,
it?
No. But once you see it, it's quite. But I loved working on it because it had such a great cast and it's just so many. It made my job so much easier. When you have a cast of such solid actors, you can concentrate on the sparkly bits, the nuances to the lines. You don't have to work on the meat of it. That's already taken care of you because the actors have those instincts.
Right,
so,
right. Just for those of you listening at home, I wasn't one of those actors who was one of the main guys. I just like to state.
I would also like to state that these calls are not mine. Should we talk about audition process and how that works?
I think so.
When we're auditioning a new series, I'm the one running the auditions generally. If it's a series I'm directing, we have casting directors who work at the studio, but they don't actually do the directing for the auditions generally. So I'll bring people in, and if you're lucky in the course of a group of auditions, you'll see 5, maybe 10 people who you haven't seen before who are worth seeing again. But for the most part, you're just bringing the people in who are good, so you can get a version of them reading the character and get them the parts that they deserve. And I do remember that there were 2 characters that I thought you would be good for. You were in my first 1 or 2 choices for, but sadly the choice does not always fall to me, the final decision.
That's true.
But
I'm only half kidding.
You did play some parts in that.
I did. And frankly, I'm always happy when I'm involved in any show. For many, many years, I made my living doing nothing but guest stars.
Yeah.
So I can't complain. The fact that you still risk your career by bringing me into the room.
It's very little
I don't know
risk.
why you do it.
In fact, as I was getting ready for this little interview, I looked on my computer and went through the scripts, or just went to my little Mac folder with all my scripts and did a search for the term Trevor Devall, just to see how many times these 2 magical words appear in my scripts. And I kid you not, ladies and gentlemen, 390 instances of the term Trevor Devall in probably the last, this isn't in all my scripts, this is, the last 5 shows kind of thing. So Trevor works a lot for a very good reason.
That's a lot of Devall.
Yes, never too much. It's chocolatey, it's steamy, it's going right off the rails.
Yes, let's bring it back.
Yes.
But thank you so much. That's very nice to hear. So let me ask you something. Do you, as a director, did you have any sort of, what was your training as a director? Or
My training as a director is pretty much non-existent. There's no course you can take for ADR cartoon voice directing 101. It's such a rarefied field. There's, in the whole city of Vancouver, I don't know how many people are doing it on a regular basis, but certainly I could count them on one hand.
Yeah.
And so, there's not a lot of demand for courses teaching that. My background, when I was younger, I was very involved in theater and local theater growing up. That was all my extracurricular activities seemed to be involved in theater, creating little, high school theater groups that would travel around to elementary schools and put on ridiculous plays for the little kids who would be happy just to be out of class. That was good times. But when I left high school, I came to Vancouver right away. And
From where?
From Kelowna.
Oh, Kelowna. Okay.
And I decided I was at health issues at this time, so I didn't want to take on too much work-wise. So I went to a community college. I went to Langara and just did some general art stuff just to see what piqued my interest, because I really at this point had no idea what I wanted to do. And over these times, I was going to gigs every night, pretty much, just seeing bands play, because that I'm a music geek and I really like seeing whatever I can.
You were the one that said to me that you couldn't get the iPhone because you were waiting for a phone that had more than 16 gigs of memory.
Yeah,
because
if I can't have 32 gigs, it's not worth it, because I'm constantly shuffling the music I'm listening to. I need to have the capacity.
32 gigs worth of MP3s?
Well, because this is the longer story. My girlfriend got me really good headphones, which necessitated me upping the bit rate on all my MP3s because they all started sounding like crap. So I need more space. It's complicated. I'm an audio geek. I fully admit it.
That's all right. It's all right. You're safe here. You're among friends.
Yes. So during these times of going to all these gigs, and in the meantime at school writing essays about books other people had written, which always seemed really abstract to me, and I wasn't exactly sure why I was doing it. I decided maybe I should try and getting into music, because that's where my passion was, and I was really enjoying that part of my life. So I went to a few different recording schools in town and found one that I thought was a good fit, and signed up for the full recording arts master's program and all that it entailed, which included, music business courses and computer courses and studio lab time and recording bands and post-production. And for a long time, I really thought I was going to be a music producer. That was my ultimate goal. But I started volunteering at studios and listening to bands and realizing that the vast majority of the bands I was listening to were just really, really bad, and the music that they played would get caught in my head for days on end. I have a really weird brain for getting songs caught in my head, so it would really torture me. I'd go to sleep hearing it, I'd wake up hearing it, and it was just, I wasn't happy. So I through a friend I went to school with, got an interview at Ocean, and I literally had no idea what they did at Ocean when I walked through the door. And
Me too.
Walked in and said, I have this audio training and I'd like to do something with it, and right away I was put into session as a DAT backup engineer.
Now explain that for the kids at home.
DAT backup engineer. Well, in an ADR session, the time code for the next line is put into Pro Tools and lined up, so you get 3 beeps. It's a beep, 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 go. So it's lined up so that the first flap is on the go. And my job as DAT backup was to listen to those beeps, and right when the third beep hit, I would write down the time that was on the DAT tape. So back then we were using what was called a DAR, this is pre-Pro Tools kind of technology. It was a dedicated digital audio system. It had 8 tracks. It was all touchscreen interface. Very weird system, but really quite useful at the time. But unfortunately, a little bit finicky at times. It would crash a lot. So we would have a DAT backup of every line. So it was my job to write the time code when the line happened. So if the machine crashed, we could still piece the show back together from the DAT tapes. Over the years, Pro Tools has come up and we started using that. It's a lot more stable. No more DAT backups necessary. But I'm really grateful I had that job, because I think it allowed me to get an insight into directing that I wouldn't have had otherwise. The engineer is busy the whole day. He's doing his own stuff. He's mixing with levels. He's making sure everything's right. So his focus is on his shit. The director's doing his thing. But the DAT backup, once you write those numbers, you can watch what everybody else is doing. And I would watch, it was usually Carl, watch what Carl was doing and try and figure out that dynamic between the actor and the director, and I figured that I could do that because I directed theater before. And thought
right,
that,
so it was really the perfect training ground for someone.
It really was.
You coming from a theatrical background as it was, and having some experience with directing, to be able to sit there and observe and just learn by observation.
You really are given a lot of time to do it, because literally your only job is writing down those numbers. So everybody else is really busy, and you're just sort of sitting back and watching. And that just afforded me a little insight that a lot of people don't get anymore, because people who try directing now from from a place of not having spent any time in session, that would be an extremely daunting task because you wouldn't know where to start, basically. But yeah, having that experience and watching Carl do it, I was a little more comfortable. And also dialogue editing, that helps a lot as well, because you see, if a line doesn't fit when you're dialogue editing, you see what you have to do to it to make it fit. So when you get into the director's chair, that technical side of making the lines fit, that's second nature already, so you can focus on the part that you're not as familiar with.
And that's something you do a lot, just from my own experience watching you work, is I'll inevitably screw up the line, and you are able to go, I see you, suddenly talk to the technician and go, and I don't know what you're saying, but I can tell that you're talking about just adjusting this by a few frames and moving this.
Yeah.
And the whole time I'm thinking, well, we have to redo the line, but you come on and go, okay, moving on. So you fixed it just by...
Which is probably overkill on my part, just because I was a technician. I feel like I have to show off and know that I can still do that, even though the engineer is perfectly capable of doing it himself. I was probably thinking, okay, buddy, shut up. I know what I'm doing. But yeah, it does save a lot of time. I mean, back, especially even with digital video now, we didn't used to have, everything happens so quickly.
Yeah.
It's just great.
So how did you actually make the transition from technician to director at Ocean? What was the process?
I was dialogue editing a lot and getting a little tired of it, because it's a very specific job and it drives you a little crazy when you first start doing it, because basically, for those of you who don't know, dialogue editing involves making the lines fit and also cleaning out all the little type sounds that you will find in all lines. Everybody has spit noises their mouth makes, and it's the dialogue editor's job to clean those out. And so it's not, really exciting work. It takes time and it's labor intensive, but so I was getting to the point where I was losing interest in it, quite frankly, and thinking of what I was going to do next. And then it sort of came through the grapevine that there was a show coming up and they didn't know who they were going to use as a director. So I just sort of stormed into the studio manager's office and said, I am your new director, and with absolutely no confidence, but projecting it nonetheless, saying, I have all sorts of experience with this kind, working with actors, which I had worked with actors, but, I extended it a bit. But I just said, basically, take a chance on me. I think I can do it, and they did, which is one of the great things about Ocean, is they're always willing to let people stretch their wings a little bit there and try something new, and they gave me that opportunity, and turns out I didn't overtly suck, so I was able to continue doing it. And yeah, now it's been pretty much 9 years of directing, and yeah, it's really the best job I've ever had.
Right on. Well, we're going to come back and get you to share a little bit of your favorite moments from the best job you've ever had in just a second, but first we're going to take a little break. Don't go anywhere.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Frederick Von Fiddlefapper reporting to you live from Grover's Mill, New Jersey, where there seems to be a crash site for a gigantic unidentified flying object. Witnesses saw a huge fireball hurling across the sky at breakneck speed, which then plowed straight into the middle of the town square. I now have with me Dr. Brouhaha, professor of all things geeky. Tell us, Doctor, is this the first sign of intelligent alien life from another galaxy?
Well, this appears to be a gigantic antenna meant to spread news about video games, cartoons, anime, movies, technology into the atmosphere, and it is called the Big Bald Broadcast.
Tell us, why do you call it that, Doctor?
It says right there in huge letters. What, are you an idiot? Swinefoot.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I'm absolutely speechless right now, ladies and gentlemen. This Big Bald Broadcast is having a bizarre effect on the townspeople, including yours truly. I have the sinister urge to tune my web browser over to bigbaldbroadcast.blogspot.com and download the latest geeky news with hosts, voice actor Kyle Hebert and musician Otherworld Steve. I'll also have to check for daily nerdy news links on twitter.com/bbroadcast. Now, if you'll excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go get an iPhone and fondle it.
Settle in. This could be a long one.
I already told you, man. Rei Ayanami is the hottest anime character ever!
Oh, please, hello? CC from Code Geass is so much hotter. Give it the time.
Gee, never! I hate you!
We're being such a noob! Gah!
Hey, calm down there, campers. I think I've got something you should take a listen to.
There's more to anime than just who's hotter than who.
That's why we at the Anime Counterpoint aim to discuss less obvious topics in anime and offer you a new outlook on your favorite genre.
And you have a chance to join us in the debate. Simply send us your questions and comments to animecounterpoint@googlemail.com, and we'll bring your thoughts to the table.
Join me, Masako X,
Myself, Kaiser Neko.
And I, HBI2K.
for the Anime Counterpoint at animecounterpoint.blogspot.com. Look forward to hearing from you.
You hunted down the Ark of the Covenant and stopped very bad Nazi men with him. You slurped back chilled monkey brains and thwarted the evil of Kali's Temple of Doom. You went on the last crusade with him and his Sean Connery-like father. And then you had some kind of bad dream about a crystal skull and aliens or something totally moronic like that. But now, a bold and colorful new reimagining of everyone's favorite hatted archaeologist, Steven Spielberg and Sukhbinder Dhaliwal proudly present the merging of Hollywood and Bollywood, Indiana Jones and the Trunk of Ganesh. A new and innovative mix of action, suspense and colorful while gyrating Bollywood dancing. Sure to be as good as Slumdog Millionaire, just without all those Oscars. Indiana Jones and the Trunk of Ganesh, whipping and dancing its way to a theater near you.
You're listening to Voiceprint with Trevor Devall and Guests.
And we're back. We're back for part 2 of our episode with Mr. James Corrigall, a fine voice director. James.
Trevor.
I want to know, out of all the shows you've done, what is your favorite show?
Black Lagoon.
Okay.
Without question. It's just, it was such a joy from every aspect of it. And, you know, casting it was a joy because we had, you know, people were delighting in it because of the text. You know, it's so rare that a lot of the actors I work with get to drop the F-bomb on any kind of regular basis. And there was just, you know, giddy glee on the faces of you. You know, we ruined a lot of takes because you get, you know, the really serious, fine. And then it was stuff, you know, we just ruined the take. But, you know, Mareka, who played Revi, was just, I loved her in that role. And I had to fight, actually, to get her even audition for that role because the casting people on our side said, she's so wrong for that. She always plays the little girly type. Don't even waste her time.
Wow.
And I'm like, first of all, actors don't consider auditions a waste of time. That's what they do for a living.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think Mareka could really surprise us. And she was chosen. And I think she just did an incredibly good job. She was just delightful.
When I watch that show, it's hard for me to remember that it's her.
I know.
You know, I mean, her voice, she's not doing anything with her voice, but the attitude of the character is just
so diametrically opposed to Mareka. Because she is the sweetest, most, you know, I work with so many actors, and Mareka showed up on the scene, it was about 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah.
And she came from Toronto, and I hadn't worked with her yet, and Carl had told me, like, have you met this Mareka yet? She's just incredible. Like, and I had a session with her, and she was just amazing, because she, first of all, she reads her scripts, you know, which is, and not to disparage those who don't, because it honestly isn't all that necessary, because you have the visual cue to work against, so that's half the battle right there. But she likes to know what's going on, so she comes and reads her scripts. You know, we finish a line, we move on to the next line. I'll say, okay, let's go to line 128 at 10:24, you know, 16, and she'll say after everyone, thank you. And, you know, it's just, she's the sweetest person on earth. But you know, you see her in Revi and she turns into this foul mouth, and she so enjoyed it. Like the very last line of Black Lagoon was Revi. You know, she got the cool last line that ended with her pointing her finger at the camera and saying, bang. And we must have done 50 takes on it because we all had different ideas of what the last line should be. Right. And it got progressively dirtier and dirtier as it went on. I don't know. Am I allowed to cuss on you?
Of course.
The one that was really stood out in my mind that I really hope they would pick was something to the effect of, this is possibly paraphrased, but it was, slippery cunts like me are tough to kill. And it just, like, the way she read it gave me tingles all over. It was just unbelievable. And we would constantly be trying to outdo ourselves with, you know, the dirtiness, because we were rewriting stuff all the time. Not that we had bad writing. Stephen Headley wrote that series, and he did just such a phenomenally good job on it. It was just so tight. But it was our whole cast, everybody just fit into their roles so beautifully. And you played Lagark in that, which was just such a fun role. It was so ridiculous. And your sort of counterpart was Saffron as I can't think of her, Chang, or it was some very vaguely racist Chinese kind of version. She just went so far with it. It was so much fun to watch it just spin up. And I would get so much satisfaction from the scenes between Marika and Brad when they would, have these really charged emotional scenes that would go on, and they just chewed it up for lunch. I mean, you would do, as a director, you do one part at a time, of course, and so the actors aren't really playing off of each other all the time necessarily. So we would lay Brad down, and then when Marika would come in and fill in the gaps, it was just such a satisfying thing to see that come together. It was just, it was electric.
Have you seen this YouTube thing where someone has gone through the entire
the fucking short version?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that made me so happy. That was probably the proudest moment of my entire directing career, was seeing every fucking.
You guys have to see this. You can just Google it or YouTube it, I guess.
Yeah,
do a search
look
on
for
YouTube.
Black Lagoon fucking short version, and that would be your first hit.
It's quite something.
It really is.
What else have we got here? Favorite moments. If you had to think of some favorite moments from your directing career.
Well, the favorite moments are often fleeting. I mean, the best moments are usually the outtakes that people come up with on the fly that happen to fit the flaps perfectly and just fit the mood of the scene. And yesterday was an example. Yesterday was, in fact, the final day of recording for Gundam 00.
Right.
The series is now in the can. And Paul Dobson, who plays Graham Aker, was in yesterday. And as is often the case in the final episodes of Gundam series, the main characters find themselves floating in space naked. Now, there's never been any explanation as to specifically why they're naked in space, but they are, and it lends itself to a more ethereal kind of mood, and sort of everybody's reading each other's thoughts and ghostly things are happening. And so the only problem is that for whatever BS&P regulations, they've turned into Ken dolls when they're naked. They have no junk. And so we had this first line from Paul yesterday, and the beeps happened, and there was even a little hesitation in the flaps that he hit. And the line came out as, "Someone's stolen my penis." And I felt like it took me 5 minutes to get back on track because it fit the flaps so perfectly. It was though it was written for that. And it was just, and lines come up like that pretty much every day. So to specify a favorite moment is almost
There's
impossible.
too many.
Hamtaro was a great, resource for it because it was the cutesier the show, the more egregious
of course
the outtakes.
Yeah, the more frustrating it is for us to not go into a vulgar tirade.
Well, Powerpuff Girls Z lent itself to such horrifying thing. Like the number of times the outtake "Let's F him in the A" came up was just really unfortunate.
We really are a bunch of awful people.
It's true, but awful entertaining is what it comes
awful
down.
Funny.
Yeah.
I often do an advice section of the show, and today is going to be no different. But I want to split up. The advice section into kind of two parts. And the first part is your advice to budding voice actors as a director, from a director's standpoint. What are some of the things, some of the pointers you might give to people trying to break into the business or trying to become like us, their idols?
Well, first of all, don't be overly optimistic because it is a tough road to hoe. I won't kid you guys. I mean, it's a rarefied business that we're in, and the people who make it through the door make it through for a reason because they're really good at it. And there's
oh, there's my phone.
Who's calling? Is it a potential voice actor?
See, now, if I was responsible, I'd just edit this out, but I'm too lazy.
No, let's not bother. Yeah, anyway, it's to become a voice actor is a tough road. I mean, for any actor, you have to basically resign yourself to a life of going on job interviews. That's what your main job is interviewing. And unless you really enjoy that process, then you're probably looking towards the wrong field. I mean, it's tough. I certainly couldn't do it because when I direct auditions, those are usually my least favorite days, to be honest, because the people who I know who come in, it's basically on autopilot. I know they're going to do a good read. I'm not going to have to tell them very much. I know they're going to be good in the part, so I give them, I generally give letter grades for my auditions, and I always grade them well. But the newbies who come in and are obviously new and are nervous, I really have empathetic feelings for them. Like I hear their voices waver, and I get really nervous for them. And so, if you're trying to do it, try and get those nerves in check, and try and at least portray an air of confidence, even if you don't have it. And when I'll take you through an average audition.
Yes,
say.
do.
And so the actor comes in, meet and greet, and you want to avoid being too friendly. You just want to be polite. You don't want to spend a lot of time. I've got to see 50 of you people in the course of a day, and I really don't care when it comes down to it, especially as the day goes on. But we'll get you set up in the booth, and I'll ask you if you have any questions about the sides for the character you're reading, and if you have any specific questions regarding pronunciation, or something that you need a concrete answer for, that's great. Please ask them. But I've had a lot of people come in and say, so how do you want this? How do you want me to read this? And that's a very vague question, and I would generally respond with, I'd like you to read it well. I'd like you to do your best job with it.
Because that is the actor's job, is to make those choices. It's not the director's job.
No, exactly. Especially in the audition process. I want to see basically what I'm looking for, and my criteria for judging an actor in my notes when I'm running an audition. First, they'll be reading for a character, so I'll determine whether the voice they're using is appropriate for that character. That's obviously the first, thing to consider, because if they have the wrong voice, there's no point going any further. And some people will let actors read through the voice they're wrong for. I tend to just I don't like wasting people's time, so I'll say, no, you're wrong for that. Let's move on to this. I know you'll be good at this. But, so that's the first stage, trying to make sure you've got the right voice for the part. And then I just let them run through it. I asked if you have any questions. And if you have specific questions, that's great, but don't go overboard, and just go with your instincts, because part of what I'm looking for is to see how you interpret the text without any direction. I want to see how much work it's going to be for me if you get the part.
Right.
And people who hit all the beats that I have in my head, because of course every director has a read in their head that's how they would do it, and generally, the closer the actor gets to that read, the happier you are with them. And if they're right on it, at that point, your next pass can be looking for the nuances, the little sparkly bits that you can make shine that elevate it from a typical mediocre read into a really special read. And when you have actors at that level, then you're so happy as a director, because all your work involves taking something that's already good and making it better, rather than taking something that's mediocre and trying to get it up to the level of good.
Right. Putting the lipstick on the pig.
Exactly. So, that's something I'm looking for. And even if an actor comes in and has perfect instincts, I'll often ask them to do another read that I'll push them away from their instincts and see how they take direction.
Right.
Just
to throw them a curveball.
Because you'd be amazed at how many people come in with a great read, but they have no malleability when it comes to that. A good example is villains. Whenever a grandiose villain comes up, 80% of people who come in will want to read him with a British accent.
Yes, I'm so very evil.
Exactly. And that, because it does lend itself very naturally and smoothly into that character, but for whatever reason, and I never actually get concrete answers about it, a lot of clients don't like hearing accents in their shows. They want it to sound like Middle America. They want to sell it as much as they can, so we go with that. And I'll tell them that, and despite that piece of direction, I'll get another read where the British accent is just leaking through the whole read. They're trying to push it away, but they've been so locked into that read that they can't seem to get away with it. And at that point, I know that they're useless to me, because if we disagree at any point, they're not going to be able to change.
Right.
And especially with ADR directing, because I have to have the whole episode sort of laid out in my head, and if the actor forces me to go too far away from that vision, then
everything else changes.
Everything falls apart. The toughest part of our ADR directing is maintaining that flow from line to line when you don't have the actors playing off each other. So you have to constantly be keeping that in mind.
Right. So now, what kind of advice would you have to someone who is looking to become a director?
To become a director, it's like I was saying before, it's such a strange business. The reason I was asked to try directing was probably because I developed a reputation for
control freakishness.
Yeah, no, I'm not even kidding. We would do sessions with directors in LA over ISDN lines, and at which point it would be the actor, usually a prelay session, the bunch of actors in the room and the 2 engineers in the studio talking to the director, and things come by really fast and furious, and I would find myself sometimes like, are you sure you want to keep that? Because there was a little bit of a stumble in the blah, blah, blah. And, I'm surprised I wasn't fired in retrospect for saying things like that, but I did, and I guess it, got back to the powers that be that I had some sort of, if not knowledge, then at least balls.
Arrogance,
yeah, arrogance. There you go. Let's just call a spade a spade. And I, turned out to be okay at it. So they haven't fired me yet. But for the first, honestly, for the first several years of directing, I was waiting for somebody to tap me on the shoulder, we know you don't know what you're talking about. We'll just let you leave now.
I have that feeling every day of my
common.
life.
Yeah.
I think I've said this before, but my big fear is that one day there's going to be a knock on the door, and there's going to be a couple guys in suits, and they're going to go, you have to get a real job now. You have to be part of the normals.
We have a smock for you. Could you just put this on?
You have to join the workforce like everybody else and pay taxes and all that stuff.
Yeah, because when it comes down to it, no matter how many bad days you can have, you can still step back from the job that we do and go, we're making cartoons for a living. We have some of the best jobs in the world. It's pretty freaking awesome when it comes down to it.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Let's see what's in the mailbag.
Martin's mailbag.
And Marty tells us a few things.
I know that sheep.
Dolly? How did you get in my headphones,
I went
Dolly?
to private school for a year. The sheep.
Martin says, for those of you coming to Anime North on May the 22nd to the 24th, Mark Hildreth will not only be in attendance. Mark Hildreth will not only be in attendance, but will be doing a concert performance of what I'm guessing is Mark Hildreth and
Clog
the Mark
dancing. No.
and the Mark Hildreth Band. All right. Getting on with our questions. There's a whole schwack of them. The first one is from Caitlin. She says, hey, Trevor and James, I had this big fear that episode 20 was the last, but I was wrong. Yes, you were. You were very wrong. You were very wrong, Caitlin. So my question is, what is the most rewarding part of directing?
The most rewarding part of directing,
is the money.
Yes, it will be. No, there's a really good sense of completion with ADR directing on all sorts of levels. Like every line you complete, because you're tackling the show line by line.
Mm-hmm.
So in your head, you've got this sort of arc idea for the show, but when you get the right piece of it into place, like after every keeper take, there's that little bit of satisfaction. And then you add to that when a scene comes together when all the actors come into the scene, you hear that come together. It's this whole other level of wow, that sounds really good, and it's exactly the way I envisioned it, and it's actually come together the way I wanted to. And then when you watch the whole series, at the end of the batch of episodes, when you do 4 or 5 episodes, there's that just wonderful feeling of completion when that's 5 episodes in the can, and you feel really if you feel like you've done everything you can for it, it's an awesome feeling.
Much
really
like God must have felt
Indeed.
After creating the universe.
And anime and the universe are similar in so many ways. It really is. It's the most fun I've ever had going to work because
Amen, brother.
Absolutely.
This one's from Karina in White Rock, BC, just down the road. Firstly, I want to give a shout out to you for the success of your podcast. It's an amazing feat for just 20 episodes, and with just the short amount of time you've done voice work over the years, there we go.
We get that again, Trevor, with just a little bit more.
Right, one more time, and beep. Beep, beep. And with just the short amount of time you've done voice work over the years, especially for anime, your versatility and range is incredible. I love watching everything you work on, so keep up the work. Well, thank you very, very much. She wants to know if I or any of my fellow voice actors / directors will be attending this year's Anime Evolution convention in Vancouver. I will be there, along with some other folks. I think Sam's going. Are you going to be there as well?
I, in fact, will be there. I was initially asked to be a full participant, but I thought I was going to be out of town at the time, so I declined. But that fell through, so it turns out I'm going to be doing 2 panels, one for Gundam 00 and one for Nana, as far as I know.
Perfection.
So please show up to those. They will be scintillating, tantalizing, and electrifying.
Wow.
3 adjectives.
As for Mr. Corrigall, my question to you is this. I do a lot of editing at home, and I'm very much interested to work in the field of animation as a career, working behind the mic, so to speak. Because you mostly do voice directing and dialogue editing, what sort of schooling did you have to get where you are now? What kind of schools and training can you suggest for those who, like myself, want to do anything like sound editing or directing? And can you learn those skills without taking any acting classes, or is that a bit of a bonus? I think we've already kind of addressed this a little bit, but I would like to know where you actually went to school here in town.
I went to a school called Center for Digital Imaging and Sound, which is no longer the same entity. It was bought out by a larger company, I believe, and it's now called something else entirely. You know, as far as the recording schools go, if that's where you want to get into, there's very few bad ones out there. It's all about what you put into the program. I was always astonished when I was at school by the number of people, because it was an expensive school. We were often paying, $10,000 for a semester because of the lab courses we would take. We would be getting significant amounts of studio time. And, 24-track analog studio time don't come cheap.
Yeah.
And, we would figure out, my partner and I would figure out the guys who were not all that invested, and they would just not show up to their labs. They would have this, 6-hour block of studio time open for them, and they would just slough it off.
Wow.
So we would get double the lab time. And, it's all about what you put into it. I was always amazed by how people were not willing to give their all. So if you're really into this stuff, any recording school that has a reputation is going to be worth your time.
And there's quite a few of them in town.
There seem to be, yeah. I mean, it's been so long since I paid attention to them. But, what you want to look for is a comprehensive program that deals with, studio music recording, deals with post-production, deals with, the business side of music. There's so many facets to it. You want to sort of get the most well-rounded experience you can.
Well, Karina, you're in the right place if you live in White Rock, because Vancouver's just down the street, so there's lots of places to go to school here. She also wants to know if there is, in fact, a Canadian actor by the name of Mark Hildreth. And as we've already discovered, yes.
There is indeed.
There is indeed, and he's a singer as well.
He's a Gundam boy, too, back in the
Yes,
day.
he was, and Gundam Wing, apparently.
Not one of the ones I directed. But
Not one of the ones you directed.
Certainly not worth my time.
All right, this is from... Oh, stupid me. Stupid me didn't put the name down. Well, you know who you are. I love the show. Oh, you.
Blushing. We're both just blushing.
This person says, I love the show. Hope it lasts for many more episodes yet. 2 questions. The first is for James. What is the most challenging episode you've ever directed? And the second is to me, which I'll get to in a second. So the most challenging episode you've ever directed.
Okay, well, there's different ways of approaching this. I mean, the first episodes of any series are challenging because that's when you're setting the voices. And a lot of the time, like Gundam 00, for instance, we didn't do a full course of auditions for. We sent voice samples to the clients. I sent them my first 3 choices using voice samples from other shows and other auditions, and they came back with their choices for those roles. And so when we actually got into the recording process, we really didn't have any voices set for those characters. We had ideas of those voices. So it was up to me to create 30 characters on the first, few days of recording. And that's a stressful process because if you don't do it right the first time, you're sort of screwed for the rest of the series.
Right.
So you want to make it right. But I mean, that's, a pressure situation. But I think, for the most stressful, you would have to go to Powerpuff Girls Z, which was, I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but Powerpuff Girls Z is a Japanese reimagining of the North American series Powerpuff Girls. And it's skewed to a younger demographic. So it's a lot more little girly kind of feel to it. And there was one episode we did, a 2-part episode that involved the girls in a haunted house. And there was... the script seemed to entail line, run away from the ghost, scream. Line, 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 run away from the ghost, scream in unison. So I would have to have 3 screaming girls. And it was, we had a great cast. We had Marika Hendricks as Bubbles. We had Nicole Boma as Blossom. And we had Kelly Metzger as Buttercup, who are all fantastic actors. But it doesn't matter how good you are. When you're screaming like a little girl, you're still like a dentist drill in my ear canal. And after a day of that, it was incredible. Like I've never felt so exhausted. The engineer apparently went home after that session and went to sleep at 7:30 and slept for 14 hours.
Wow.
Because you don't understand, like in this session, because we have to listen at a level at least 72 dB to get a good sense of what's going on, to make sure that we're not missing any tech issues and we hear every nuance of the sound. So after 8 hours of hearing screaming little girls, I can't even begin to explain it. That was the worst.
That's like my basement every Saturday night.
I don't want to know what goes on in your basement. I'm picturing chains and
It puts lotion on its body.
Oh my God. You've had Mike on your show before. Mike does the most disturbing impression of the killer from Silence of the Lambs.
Buffalo Bill.
It puts this lotion on its skin and then it's something again. Like, he would say that to me and I would almost be reverted to tears. It was...
It rubs the lotion on its body or it gets the hose again.
That's it, yeah. Oh, God. Chills.
The next question was from me. What did you make of the resurrection of Moo for Seed Destiny? That's a spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen it.
It's been out for a while. Anybody who hasn't seen it is a loser.
What did I make of it? Well, I kind of knew it was him from the beginning. Because James said to me, "Yeah, just do the Moo voice."
Was that a spoiler? I thought I was being so mysterious.
I liked it because, of course, I get a chance to be the coolest character I've ever played in my life.
It was the Han Solo character.
Completely.
Absolutely.
Oh, and you were the guy, because remember, so I get this question a lot at conventions, because I offhandedly mentioned that there would be times when we were recording Gundam Seed where a line would come up and I would just twist it into a Han Solo line.
It's so easy to do because Gundam, as much as I love Gundam, it is a very heavy-handed show. It's melodrama.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the Gundam musical because something so melodramatic should so easily lend itself into the musical realm. But so you can quite easily change the Gundam melodrama into the George Lucas melodrama because his dialogue is just as stilted and just as absurd. So yeah, it really works well.
This is from Zaid. Hey guys, Trevor, I wanted to congratulate you on a stunning 20th and now 21st episode. It's been rocking so hard, grannies can't stay in their chairs and pressing their life alerts. Well, that's awesome. James Corrigall, magnificent work. You made my after-school days in the past a delight. Until supper, because I would turn off the TV, but then turn it back on, so thank you.
That's very nice.
This question is for both you guys. Were there instances where a part was given to someone, to the actor, looking like the character? For example, the casting director says, no one went for the cowboy motorcyclist from Australia. I guess I'll have to give it to Scott McNeil, yeah? So was there any times where people got the role when they looked like the character?
I have to say, at Ocean, we deal with another company called IPP who deals with a lot of the casting stuff, and they have the head of IPP whose job it is basically to create choices for upcoming characters, and then we get together and figure out who we're going to cast, pending client approval. And without fail, every single time a bald character showed up, Richard Newman would be suggested, who is literally the only follically challenged voice actor in the city. And not that he's not appropriate, because he's a great actor and he can pretty much play any of those roles, but the fact that it was always bald to bald was just a little, really? We can't think outside the box. But I'm guilty of it as well. Like, there's, when you see a character, when you're presented with a casting decision, it's often they'll play the Japanese voice, and so your brain automatically goes to, okay, who does that sound like? Who does that look like?
Right.
You can't help yourself,
right.
So you end up going in that direction, and yeah, it's inevitable. I'd like to think that I make courageous decisions from time to time and go outside the box, but a lot of the time you just go with what feels right, and that's often the
well, for example,
choice.
You casting me as Moo LaFlaga. I, of course, look nothing like Moo,
no,
but very, very similar to Brad Pitt. I look a lot like Brad Pitt, so So I can understand that, right?
That's absolutely true. Not saying anything.
This is from Maddie St. Pierre. Hey, Trevor, the last episode was great. Being the long-time anime fan that I am, I watched Gundam Seed on YTV all 3 times it played, but didn't buy the DVDs. But for some reason, I found the episode on my collection of VHS tapes, so it worked out. My question for James is, was there any other voice actor that was set with you over their roles in Gundam?
It was set with me?
Was set with you. Like Sam
Upset
said.
with me? You mean upset
Tabitha
with me?
was with... upset with you. Yeah, of course. Was upset with you over the roles in Gundam. Like Sam said Tabitha was upset over Flay, for example.
Flay. Yes, Flay. Tabitha was the first actor I'd ever encountered who cheered like a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader when her character died a gruesome death. She did these little flippy moves. She was so happy. Flay, for those of you who've seen Gundam Seed, is the worst, most high maintenance girlfriend ever.
Oh, yeah.
She's just
it's
horrible
quite
on
awful.
all levels. So we're really happy to get rid of her. But I, for some reason, take a perverse pleasure in assigning Tabitha roles that are going to piss her off. Like, you talk about Flay, but don't forget, in that same series, she also played Haro and Birdie, which after Flay died, she would come into session and she would just say, Haro, Birdie. This was the extent of her day. And yet, she still brought cookies to every session.
Every time.
This is why Tabitha never misses. I mean, there is also the point that she can play pretty much any role you throw at her. She has the most ridiculous range of any actor you come across and is such an incredibly talented actor. But on top of that, she brings cookies.
That's right. And
fresh, delicious cookies for us to eat.
That's the real reason why she's on every show
Absolutely.
in town. Let's not kid ourselves.
It's not easy to get into voice acting, kids. Just find quality baked goods.
That's right.
And distribute as necessary.
That's right. Bribery always works. This is from Leanne. Hello, Trevor. I'm a big Gundam fan, and I have a question for James Corrigall. My question is, when they were casting for Gundam Seed, did they in fact make Brad Swale beg and plead to be allowed to audition for a role?
I would never make Brad beg and plead. I made him strip and dance. That's a totally different thing.
Not the same thing at all.
Not at all. No, if memory serves, there was some contention with Brad auditioning because he played Amuro in First Gundam, or was it Gundam Wing? I didn't direct those, so I don't know for sure. But one of those, he was an iconic character, and so there was some reticence. I don't even remember if it was on the part of the clients or on the part of our casting department as to whether he should audition at all. And I honestly can't remember whether Diarca, the character that he played in Seed, was an audition character. I think it might have just been one we assigned to him once we got past that hurdle of using him.
Right.
And he did a great job with that.
Yeah.
Brad does have a very recognizable voice, but there's often a prejudice in casting that people feel they can't use the same voice that was in another series that had any similarities. Where, if you look at on-camera acting, there's no problem casting Samuel L. Jackson in pretty much every single movie that comes up, and nobody complains about that. But,
I complain about that, but don't get me started on that.
Philip Seymour Hoffman, say.
Okay,
he plays,
that's one. That's an example that won't start a fight in this room.
There you go. And he's playing a lot of similar characters, but we still accept him in them because he does such a freaking good job at them. And from my perspective, I want to work with the actors who do a freaking good job with the acting. So there you go.
And Brad, he gets it. And I think Brad probably holds the record for being able to nail more lines per hour.
I think actually, I hate to say it, but I think it belongs to Scotty in my sessions. Scott in Monster Rancher actually hit the 100 lines an hour mark.
Really?
Which I have never come close to before.
Wow.
It was because his character in that had these massive pages of reactions, and Scott understands how it works, so he will watch the reaction and then do the sound just a beat after it.
Right.
And
so
do that in sync the entire time. So they do that for pages. So by the end of it, you just take the entire take, shift it back 10 frames earlier,
and it's all there.
Perfect.
Huh.
Yeah, he has a preternatural ability
well,
for that stuff.
I guess he's okay. He has some small amount of talent, I suppose.
Yeah.
This one's from Michael from Toronto, my good friend Michael. Hey, Trevor and James, how you doing? I know I say this every time I write in, but Gundam 00 is excellent. Everybody involved in the show is just great at what they do. Actors, writers, and directors alike. I have seen both the subtitle and the English dub versions of Gundam 00. And I can honestly say that you guys do the characters great justice. Well, thank you, my friend. This is a question for both of you. As an actor or a director, how difficult is it to bring a show from Japan over to an English-speaking audience while trying to maintain the feel of the original producers and creators and that which they intended? Keep up the awesomeness. This is a very good question because I know there's a lot of people out there, I forget what they're called, but there's some Japanese word for the fans who refuse to watch the dubs because they feel that the dubs somehow miss the point of the original intention.
I call them poopy pants.
Poopy pants, yes. And I believe, in fact, if you translate the Japanese into English, it comes out as poopy pants.
The idea of maintaining the intent of the Japanese is very important, obviously, to us. Like we want to keep the same feeling that we've had going through, but we also want it to be accessible to North American audiences, and we don't want to defer to the Japanese to the extent that it is going to be inaccessible. I mean, Gundam's a good example because Gundam is a very heavy-handed series, and it deals with
space opera.
It really is, and I will come across lines sometimes that are so George Lucas-y is the only way I can put across. They're so the way people don't talk. And they cry out for polishing. And luckily in my job, there's very few instances where somebody's looking over my shoulder. So what I will do in that instance is I will get a version of a line as written, so my butt is covered, and then I will rewrite the line to a way that I think sounds good, get a version of that, and that will be the keeper. And unless somebody's really offended with what I've done, then mine will be the version that ends up in the final product.
Right.
And I mean, as to maintaining the integrity of the Japanese, it's really hard to stray away from the idea of the Japanese because we're constantly referencing the original Japanese audio and using that as a sort of a stepping stone for what we're going to do. And I mean, I find that that's my biggest inspiration for what we're doing is to try and maintain the energy and the feel of the Japanese, especially with Gundam, because my God, those battle scenes get intense in the Japanese. Like, they give every ounce of themselves in those performances.
Wow.
And yeah, it's great.
Once again, I've gone and screwed this up. There's a couple more questions here from people that I somehow neglected to put who they were from. So I am sorry, my apologies for that, but again, you know who you are. I have to say, it is an honor to ask a question to the voice director of Gundam Seed, the show that got me hooked onto anime.
Wow.
Today. Wow, high praise.
Thank you for that.
I loved Gundam Seed and thought it was one of the best anime series I've ever watched.
Wow.
My question is this. In most of the Gundam series, the story takes place in a fictional period, such as the Cosmic Era in Gundam Seed. However, Gundam 00 is set only 300 years from the present day. What do you think is the reasoning behind setting Gundam 00 in the near-distant future?
A very detailed. You
yes,
have
indeed.
Very involved questioners.
And at the risk of being cliche, I would like to rephrase that question in the manner in which we are most used to hearing it asked. However, Gundam 00 is set only 300 years from the present day. What do you think is the reasoning behind setting Gundam 00 in the near-distant future? Answer now.
That question creates so much more pressure than the previous one. I'm feeling judged. I can't speak honestly to that issue because, I mean, I have no contact with the creator of the series, the person who envisioned, why it was put in this place. I can interpret it from the way I've tackled it from my perspective, which is that I think it's a great decision because it creates this accessibility that I felt was often lacking in some of the other Gundam series. Back in Seed and stuff, the idea of coordinators versus new types versus, it was all very vague and it didn't really give us something to identify with. Whereas this series, I don't want to get into too many details because the first and second seasons are so merged in my head. I don't want to let any spoilers. But in the very early part of the first season, the conflict all stems from the fact that Earth has used up its natural resources, which is obviously an inevitability in our society. And so they had to come up with the next step in technology, which was the solar generators that are, set up into space, these massive monoliths that are tethered to the Earth, and therefore these power centers have been created around them, which naturally leads to conflict. When you have these, solar generators dotted around the planet with power centers around them, they're going to try and fight against each other and maintain power. So I think it's very identifiable. It shows this idea of an energy dependent future that it's fairly dystopic. It's not a happy society because warfare is still rampant, and so it still allows for a lot of conflict. But it's a more identifiable conflict than I think in other Gundam series. And I personally have taken a lot more out of this show than I have from other Gundam series. I've been a lot more wrapped up in it, and I find myself excited to see what happens in the next batch, because this series has been airing in Japan almost in conjunction with how we've been recording it. So when I started season 2, I had no idea what was going to happen at the ending of season 2. I was just in the dark as the average fan. So I was sort of, any foreshadowing, I was sort of hoping for the best. But I just love the way it played out in the end, and I'm not giving anything away. I think it's just an awesome season, and please tune in and buy, because it is worth watching.
Yes, do. Buy the DVDs. Keep us all in business. Once again, I have somehow screwed up and not got the name of this person, so my apologies again. However, this is my favorite question. Hello, Mr. Devall. Long-time listener, first-time questioner?
Was that in quotations?
Well, there was a question mark at the end of it.
I didn't hear the quotations.
You were great in Dragon Booster with all your daddy problems. Thank you. I know, daddy problems. Matt Hill used to give me the gears about that all the time. Father, and all your other work. I love the podcast. Oh, there's a different line. Yes, I love the podcast. It's great, but my only problem is that sometimes I have to wait too long for another episode. All right, but enough bitching. All right, why I oughta. My question for both you and Mr. James Corrigall is, and here we go, drumroll please. Why didn't Trevor get the part of Lock-On? I mean, when I first watched the show online, and I apologize, but I watched it in English on TV and loved it, I was thinking, hey, the guy who played Moo on Gundam Seed would be great for Lock-On! Don't get me wrong, the guy who plays him now is good, but I think Trevor could do it better.
Okay, well, I first want to preface this by saying that Alex Zahara, who plays Lock-On Stratus, did a phenomenal job.
Yes.
He grew into the role just beautifully.
And he's a great actor on his own account.
And not just that, but a really sweetheart of a guy.
Yes, he's fantastic.
He really tries to do his best in every role I've ever given him, and he is a consummate professional. I absolutely love working with him. That having been said, I'm going to open up a file on my laptop, which I decided to bring, that I trust Trevor to maintain his discretion with, but I'm going to show him one frame in this Excel sheet that shows the character of Lock-On Stratus and my first choice for the role. And if you would please read my choice for
first
the role.
Choice for Lock-On Stratus, Trevor Devall. And the note. Let me read the note. I think he's a pretty good voice match, and in my opinion, he's the strongest actor of the bunch.
That's right. Little ego boost for Trevor. Just what he needed. And it's true. I did think that Trevor would have done a phenomenal job on that role. And, because he's done that type of role before. But, in retrospect, I am really glad the clients made the choice they did. Not just because Alex did a great job, but because that allowed us to have Trevor in the role of Patrick Kolasauer, who is the one piece of comic relief in all of Gundam 00. And every time he shows up, he's like a breeze of fresh air running through the stale Gundam cockpit. Seriously, he is so funny. He is so, he just hit the note perfectly, and every take I would find myself laughing out loud afterwards. He did a hell of a good job with it. My only regret is that they didn't write more of Patrick, because he was a
oddly enough, that's
character.
My regret too.
Yeah.
It's funny though, because when this character came up and I did the audition, I remember thinking to myself, you know what? I'm not going to get this role. And furthermore, I don't think I want this role.
Because it was pretty much Moo.
It was pretty much Moo. And the one thing as an actor that you want to make sure you are actively doing is not pigeonholing yourself.
Exactly. And that's an easy pigeonhole to get to, because pretty much any anime series has the Han Solo character.
Precisely right. And the fact is, for me, it's no stretch. It's just my voice with a bit of a swagger to it.
Exactly right. Yeah. And let's not kid ourselves. You do it beautifully, but I can understand that you would want to try some other things. And Patrick Kolasauer was fun to play. You have to
absolutely.
admit,
and I want to thank you for handing me that role, because he was great every time I got to go in there. And because he was such a whiny
liner.
Yeah, totally. And there's so little of that in Gundam. I mean, Gundam is so heavy-handed that, like I said, I think it should be a musical. That it's so weighty.
Let's get to work on that.
Yes,
Maybe we'll
absolutely.
do a pitch. This one is from Kerboffer. Hey, Trevor and James. Chris Kerboffer here again with a very different question this time around. So, I've now officially gone in for my very first voiceover audition. I live in New York, where the work is pretty small compared to other areas around North America, but there's a few big shows done down here in particular, one of which I tried for recently that I can't talk about due to non-disclosure agreements, etc., etc. Regardless, my first audition went well. The director really liked what I did, and I had fun and gave it my all. I brought a bottle of water and a green apple just in case, which I think actually impressed him a bit, and most importantly of all, I don't think I came off as some fan or anything negative like that. Sadly, the company in charge didn't choose me for the part, but I'll get to go in next time, again, for a character suited towards me a little better when that shows up. For whenever that time may come, would you guys, as people on both sides of the glass, have any advice for specifically auditioning or any really specific things to be aware of? I used every bit of knowledge any voice actors ever told me when I went in for this first time, but anything from both an experienced actor and a director would be great. So, first of all, the fact that you used the phrase both sides of the glass is very impressive. You know the terminology. That's going to impress everybody right there, I'll tell you. I've said this before, and I'll say it again because it bears repeating. Your job as the actor in animation, regardless of whether it's prelay or ADR, is to give the animator something to draw. And even though ADR is already done, the theory still holds. Your job is to make choices that are so specific that they bring the words off the page and they paint the picture upon the canvas of the imagination. Wait, they paint the picture on the canvas of the imagination of the listener. That's what I want to say. You have to be as specific as possible in your choices, because the more specific you are, the easier it is for the listener to understand exactly what's going on, because all you have is your voice, and you've got to communicate so much with that. So that's what I will say, and what will James say?
Well, back to auditions again, it depends on so many things. A lot of people tell you when you're auditioning you want to give yourself a performance that stands out from the rest, which can either be a good thing or a pitfall. I've had so many series like Powerpuff Girls, for example. Had Powerpuff Girls Z, I should say, had the character of Mojo Jojo. This wasn't the same Mojo Jojo from the North American version. So I had asked the clients what they were looking for with that kind of audition, and they told me, just you let people do whatever they want. We want to hear a whole variety, want to surprise us, delight us, that kind of thing. So we got some incredible reads, some stuff that was just so out of left field, so interesting, but still controlled. And who did they end up picking in the end was the person who did the perfect voice match of the original Mojo Jojo.
Right.
So you never know going in what the right call to make is from the voice. But from my perspective, the people who impress me the most are the people who come in with a strong voice, one that fits into the character, obviously, and aren't begging to read sides for characters they're so drastically wrong for, just being realistic about their expectations. And they'll come in and their instincts will be solid, and they'll know how to interpret the sides properly, and they'll maybe find a few points within those sides that surprise me. A few things that I hadn't thought of myself, that they take it in maybe a different direction, not necessarily, where you'd naturally go, but something just surprising, something that makes it stand out and makes me take notice of them. Because quite honestly, as the day goes on, you might be the 20th person I've heard read the same sides, and at that point, you need to do something special to catch my attention. And so but that having been said, you don't want to go completely out into left field. It's a really tough needle to thread, which is why I'm not an actor. I mean, it's a tough life. You guys are going on job interviews full time, and you're not getting the vast majority of them. And, I mean, if you book even half of what you're auditioning for, you're doing way better than the majority. So it's a tough
and walking that line too is difficult, because you want to do something, like you say, you want to do something interesting and creative, but you don't want to go overboard. You don't want to do a sort of an advanced tip is to try and get in the audition sort of first. That's my little thing. If I can tell my agent always make sure I'm within the first 3 hours of the audition.
You have no idea what a difference that makes too. I mean,
big time.
As the day goes on, it takes more and more effort to delight us.
Exactly. But the fact is, as an actor, you don't really have a lot of control over that. But what you do have control over is your choices. And you can't, if you second guess yourself trying to figure out, well, if you go in thinking, well, I wonder what they want, you'll probably wind up betraying your own instincts.
Exactly.
And you'll always stand a much better chance by actually being absolutely true to your own choices.
True to your own instincts, absolutely. And, you go in with that read that you feel is right, but you also go in knowing that might not be what the director is looking for, and being willing to change that and being able to change that.
Exactly.
And, if you've got the sides before and practice reading it in ways that seem ridiculous to you just to get you out of the mold and get used to going against your instincts, because sometimes directors might push you there.
That's
and even
right.
if you think they're wrong, you still kind of got to do it because
That's right.
they're the ones who are making the choices.
That's right. And you can't tell them they're wrong as much as you want.
Yeah, exactly.
This is from David Jew, Lexington, Kentucky. Or maybe it's not in Kentucky. Maybe that's his name. I'm not entirely sure, David. Sorry about that. Dear Voiceprint, long-time listener, first-time writer. First off, I'd like to say off the bat to Trevor that I'm very proud that not only have you decided to host a successful podcast, but also for the fact that it has gone on much further than the 6 episodes it was supposed to be originally. Kudos to you, sir. Kudos. I was first drawn into anime in 2000. When Adult Swim premiered Gundam Wing, and I've been hooked ever since. Mr. Corrigall, if that in fact is your real name. I was wondering, given the sheer fan base size of the Gundam franchise itself, have you ever had any kind of pressure on yourself to direct every series you've done to keep up with the expectations of its fans or your peers in Japan? If so, what were they, and how did you motivate yourself to do the best directing you could? Well, we've kind of talked about that already, the idea that... or have we? Maybe I don't understand the question.
Well, the idea of maintaining the expectations.
Right.
Of the peers
Yes.
in Japan,
Right.
Quite honestly, I don't think the people in Japan have any idea of what I'm doing. They don't listen to the English dubs.
They're watching the Japanese version.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a couple of people, English-speaking people, that the Japanese hire to check what I've done and say that it's okay. But beyond that, they really have very little interest.
Jameson, we very much like what do you do?
The one, my favorite note I got from a pure Japanese speaker was to make a line, more like the blue water.
Oh, wow.
That was the only note I was given.
It's like going back to acting school.
Yeah.
You have to be a little more mauve in your performance. You have to feel more...
not puce, no, mauve.
No, you've heard me now. You've heard me.
Yeah.
This is from Daniela. Number one. Could you please talk about any sort of stresses you may have as a director? How do you deal with these?
Stresses generally stem from lines that are necessitating pronunciations. And it depends on the clients you have on a show, but some shows, I mean, clients are just incredibly anal about how Japanese words are pronounced.
Yes.
And that can create a big headache because you feel that all your focus is going into this one word and not the actual line.
Yeah.
So.
And I can tell you from my perspective, too, that so many times our whole performance gets sucked into the void of, wait a minute, is it kioske or kioske?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so sad that, and a lot of me thinks that we should just change all the names to Brad and Paul and just keep it easier. But no, I mean, when it comes down to it, that's a frustrating aspect. Also, screaming girls. Whenever, like I was talking about Powerpuff Girls Z, when we had a haunted house episode where the girls just screamed and screamed and screamed. And literally, after that day of recording, the engineer went home and went to bed at 8 p.m. and slept until 9 a.m. the next day.
Yeah.
It's because we have to listen at a high level, like 70 dB, so we can hear all the artifacts in the audio. So we're just, exposed to these screams all day long.
The second question is applicable mostly for you. Is there a song you can't help but get funky to? Well, you have several gigs of songs, so tell me.
Well, no, I don't often get funky, but for music that I listen to on a regular basis, recently I have been listening to Ockerville River a lot. I don't know if any of you out there have experienced Ockerville River. They have an album called The Stage Names and a track called Unless It Kicks. do yourself a favor, listen to that one. Also, maybe Wolf Parade off their album Apologies to the Queen Mary. Listen to the track Sons and Daughters of Holy Ghost. I'm opening up worlds for you here, people. Trust me. I'm a music snob, and this is the shit.
All right, there it is. This is from Luke. If you could, I guess this is for me. If you could meet one of the characters you have played in an anime, who would it be? If I could meet one of the characters I've played. If I could meet one of the characters. Oh, I don't know. Legark off of Black Lagoon, because I'd love to go for a ride with that guy. That'd be fun. This next one is from Vicky Morrow in Kakogawa, Japan. But I'm probably mispronouncing that. Kakogawa. No, you say Kakogawa, but it's pronounced Kakogawa. You see a big difference, please, between Kakogawa and Kakogawa.
It's been really nice at Ocean recently. In the past few years, they've started hiring Japanese-speaking people who,
thank God,
in the middle of a session, you can call them into the room and say, how do you say this frickin' word?
So this is from Vicky. She says, hi, Trevor. I just recently found your podcast, and I am loving it. Thank you so much for creating it. I have been trying to catch up on all of the past episodes. My question for James Corrigall is this. As a voice director, what do you look for in budding voice actors? Of course, the voice itself is important, but what do you look for in the actors outside of the voice? What can make a new voice actor stand out in your eyes? Well, we've already kind of talked about this a little bit, but if you had to sort of reiterate the one thing that stands out for a budding voice actor, a new, like in an audition situation, there's somebody new that you haven't seen before. What is going to make you remember them?
Well, leaving aside the fact that they have the right kind of voice and they have acting chops, let's just assume that's the case. The sort of the bonus stuff that makes you really want to pull people in are people who enjoy doing the work, people who like obviously have a passion for what they're doing and who take their craft seriously, who, you know, Andrew Francis is a good example. He's been doing this stuff longer than I have, and when I started working with him, he was a little kid, but when he started becoming an adult, he didn't just rest on his laurels as all his credits. He started taking acting classes, and he started working towards it, and, you know, people who put the effort in and really, you know, take their craft seriously just give so much back to my position. Like it's such a joy working with people who are professionals, who really take what they do seriously.
It's all about the love, man.
It is, and it's about, you know, like any job, it's about your work experience being a pleasant one. And what makes my work experience pleasant is working with people who get half of it already, and then we can just spend the time polishing what they're already doing really well.
Right.
And therefore, you know, elevating a good product into a great product rather than a mediocre product into a good product.
Right, exactly. So people who take their work very seriously by, say, creating their own podcast about their work. That might be a good something.
But you know what? Before your podcast, you know, I can remember the very first show I worked with you on, which was that Prelay show. Was it the one where you played Sir Geoffrey?
Oh, right. That was the Lost Continent. Very first job in Vancouver.
Your very first job.
Yeah.
And this, I mean, you know, we knew pretty much everybody in the city. And here comes this guy, Trevor Devall, who's playing the stalwart knight in this, you know, this cast of characters that are taken from different times. And we have Trevor Devall as the Renaissance knight who just, I mean, blew us away. We couldn't believe, like, every line he delivered was exactly the way it should be delivered. And Sue Blue, who was directing it from LA, was just as impressed as we were. And it was just because, you know, here's a guy who has grown up watching stalwart knights, you know, save damsels in distress. He knew exactly what we were looking for, and he delivered it. And, you know, ever since then, Trevor's been our go-to guy because it's just easy with him. He gets it because he's as much of a geek as the rest of us.
That's really what it comes down to.
Pretty much. It's true. The more pop culture knowledge you have, the more plugged into geekdom you are, the better you are at this
That's right.
stuff.
The easier it is to push up the taped glasses. This last one here. Once again. Oh, no. This is Jack. Jack from Oakville, Ontario. He's looking forward to the upcoming release of Sword of the Stranger and Gundam 00. To James, I want to thank you so much for your fantastic work on Black Lagoon and Gundam 00. Both shows were phenomenal. Very much looking forward to Season 2 of Gundam 00 whenever it rears its head. He has two questions. The first one we've actually dealt with before in the show, but the second one is, who played the Trinity siblings in Gundam 00?
The Trinity siblings were played by Andy Toth as Michael Trinity, Michael Dangerfield as Johann Trinity, and Nicole Boma as Nana Trinity. And not giving anything away, only one of those siblings survives a very long time and becomes actually a major player in the second season and a really, really interesting character. So,
cool. Well, there you go, Jack. Thanks for writing in, and thank you all for writing in. And again, my apologize. Yes. I come to this country to buy shoes for my children. I apologize for screwing up my note-taking there and not figuring out who was asking the questions. So it won't happen again. Sorry about that. We are at the end of our show because it's run along once again, and I keep saying, when I started doing this show, it was like an hour. And now we're getting into like
more than an hour. Look at us.
I'm telling you, it's going to be an hour and a half. It's like a Cecil B. DeMille production.
I am, undeniably delightful. So let's not kid ourselves.
I want to thank you very much, Mr. James Corrigall, for coming out.
Thank you for the invitation, good sir. I was happy to do it. This was tons of fun.
Excellent. I'm glad you came. And for the rest of you, thanks for tuning in. Don't give up. Don't despair. There is more Voiceprint to come. There's all kinds of guests coming up, and I'm not going to rattle off a list of them. In fact, I'm just going to tell you who our next guest is. This is someone that you guys have been wanting to talk to for some time, so I finally got her on the show, and she's a delight, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure that you tune in for our next episode when our guest will be the lovely, the talented, the delightful Kathy Westluck. Yes, indeed. The one, the only Kathy Westluck. If you have any questions for her, be sure to write in to voiceprint@trevordevall.com or fans@trevordevall.com. Either one will do. That's it for me. That's it for James.
Thanks, guys.
That's it for the show. Thanks for playing. We'll see you next time.
Talky talk, a little talky talk. Here we are giving a little talky talk. Check 1, 2, testing. Hello. James Corrigall, voice director. Man about town, red wine and biber.
Trevor Devall, drunkard.
That looks like tea you're drinking. That's more like teetotaler.
Ginger tea with lemon, honey, and rum.
Okay.